Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Brew Bar.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel Podcast, the Harry Potter edition. My name is Michael Chance, willingly and happily here from the How Dare You Awards. With me is Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hi, Tom.
You've just ruined the punchline of my Japanese golfer joke. R.I.P. Richard Griffith.
When did he die?
A few years ago.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shit.
Sad loss.
That's terrible.
It is.
I can't believe I didn't know that or forgot it.
But his evil double from Naked Gun 2.5 is still around.
Oh, yeah.
With his grey ponytail.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about the 2002 film Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, directed by Christopher Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, you had this as your second favorite, correct?
Certainly.
And I had this as my third favorite film in the series. This is a movie with a budget of $100 million, made $262.4 million in the US of A, $879.5 cumulatively in the world. That's a smashing success.
It certainly is.
We talked in our ranking episode about Christopher Columbus himself.
Mm-hmm.
He directed the first movie and this movie back to back.
Right.
And after that,
That explains why he didn't feel the need to explain anything to someone coming in for the first time.
I don't think he could conceive of a world in which somebody would start watching at movie 2.
It's like
okay?
Yeah, but if someone is, you need to throw them a bone. You can't just have people say their names and not put those names in context.
What's it matter? You just think everybody and everyone's from the original anyways. So, like every other sequel
What's
we
it
watch.
matter? What's it matter when 10 minutes in you're throwing me a wizard Narnia? Like, what is this Narnia for wizards? What's going on?
Oh, shit. All right, so we were talking, not at length, but we talked a bit about Christopher Columbus in the first episode. Mm-hmm. And I think Christopher Columbus, even in the episode, I referred to him as more of a cookie-cutter director.
Yeah.
But he is a director that I think knows what works. I mean, Adventures in Babysitting, Home Alone, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
I think that sums it up kind of perfectly. He knows how to make a movie work, and I think that's at play here in this movie.
He also knows, and I think this is crucial to why this eventually became one of the better movies in the series for me. He knows how to make kids movies that adults can still appreciate.
Yeah.
Like, as this movie went, like, the sort of the body horror aspects of this movie, which is, a kind of for adult movie fans, not kids, was really well handled, but with enough kind of plausible deniability to keep it a kids movie. So in the end, we kind of err on the side of gross out comedy, which marries those worlds together. So like kids love gross things. Horror movies are full of gross things. That's where we come out in the wash a lot of the time in this movie. And I learned to appreciate that because I don't feel like other directors in this series were really understanding that at some level these had to be kid-friendly comedies. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that that more bad things happen in this movie than in any of the other movies, but it doesn't feel like it. Like the mass murder of children happens in this movie. But they bring them all back to life, so it's fine.
So it's fine.
But and like so if you're when you're adult, you've got a murder mystery to deal with, you've got a body horror kind of thing going on. But if you're a kid, you've got a perfectly serviceable high school comedy to work with. So
sure.
In that sense, Cookie Cutter wouldn't be pejorative to me. I think the franchise really, at least at this stage, really needs someone who's able to, especially with the kids being that young, like all the kid actors being that young, you can't be having them do, decidedly adult things without some kind of make-believe aspect, suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree with that. So now you said that upon a first viewing, this was going to be low.
Yeah.
But then after seeing the other movies, it came back up.
Yeah.
So do you credit that to Christopher Columbus, or?
Yeah, I credit him with him getting the tone right.
Okay.
And I didn't realize at the time quite how skillful the balancing act he was pulling off was. And also, it's interesting. He's also, he's a cookie cutter filmmaker, but he's also a very Hollywood centric filmmaker. Like, this feels very Spielbergian. The use of John Williams music,
it does.
The way that he handles, fantasy and kids.
There are times where the camera's slithering like a snake.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Side note, why can't they get snakes right in CGI?
I think the basilisk looks great.
Is that what it is? Is that a snake? I have a note that says, why can't they get snakes right in CGI? They can do dragons. Isn't that the same thing? I don't know which is more ignorant, the filmmaker or me.
Are you talking more specifically about Voldemort's snake?
I don't know which snake. There's a snake in here at some point that I thought that looks like it's from. It's from a 19.
You're talking about the Dueling Club.
Yeah, that looks like it's from a 1970s episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, you're right about that. It looks like it's the animated Cobra from Ricky Tikki Tavi.
Yes.
That's what it looks like. I'll agree with that.
Okay, but that was a side note anyway.
But right, that's a side note in a scene that I really like. I like the Dueling Club scene.
Yeah.
And I think comically, one of the things that makes this movie work so well is the addition of Kenneth Branagh.
Oh my God, I could not agree with you more.
I just love him in this movie.
And this is another battle for me, because you probably don't know this. There's no reason why you would. And you would suspect as a Brit that I'd be all over him. But I can't stand Kenneth Branagh as a leading man or a director. But
interesting.
When he's in a movie as either comic relief or a villain, I think there's no one better. And this role is fucking perfect, because he is both comic relief
for him.
And turns out to be the villain.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, you were asking in the previous podcast about, like, how has this franchise passed you by? And I remember being in college when this came out, and people, around me were watching this movie. And I even remember at the time, they said, you've got to see this movie. And I gave you the same answer. It's like, no, not interested. And they said,
I don't have to.
You said, but the guy that Kenneth Branagh plays is so much like one of our lecturers. It's scary, like right down to the haircut.
Oh, wow.
And the same backstory. He was a little bit of a celebrity who got above his station and was lecturing us about things that he didn't really know about. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, so that had an added value for me. But, there's a general truth there about celebrity academics or experts who are just like taking up tenure at universities, certainly all around Britain. I suspect it's the same here. Like,
sure.
The person who should be doing this job is just less well known, so they don't get the job. But because this person's written a book that was popular.
Yeah, right.
But it was also like, in terms of J.K. Rowling, I thought it was really interesting in those early scenes where he's at the book signing. Like, I don't know if this is the case in the book or whether the movie sort of played this up a bit more. But it just feels like J.K. Rowling's really biting the hand that feeds her by having this satire of, like, book signings. It's like, you're making fun of all the fans who waited overnight in line at bookstores. Like, this is the reason you have money. Like, I
didn't feel like that was a huge part in play at the book signing.
And the Branagh character in his book Magical Me, it seemed to me to be like a satire of the commercialization of literature. And I wrote down, glass houses, J.K. Rowling, glass houses.
I didn't take it as that.
Okay.
I took it as
But the character is fucking brilliant.
A satire of the man, not the... Yeah.
The character is fucking brilliant. There is
great.
a moment in here where I imagine this is what Kenneth Branagh sees in his dreams, where he walks past an animated painting of himself doing a painting, and they both wink at each other. It's like, that's what's going on in Kenneth Branagh's head right now. It's absolutely brilliant. And we talked a little bit about how the sort of the defense of the dark arts teacher is always like the kind of novelty casting in the future movies, but I don't actually think it ever gets any better than this.
No, yeah,
and
I agree
we're talking
with that.
like Jim Broadbent, Brendan Gleeson, the best actors in the world. And still, my favorite is Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
Playing the worst teacher of those people.
The worst teacher ever, right. He's hapless.
Even Umbridge is competent, if evil.
Yeah, I suppose she would be competent if she was actually teaching them fucking jack shit.
I don't know. She makes them sign their, do lines in blood. Fuck. That can't be easy. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Branagh because I have nothing but good things to say about that, and I don't, and that's not a given. It's a given that I'd love probably all the other actors in this movie, all the other grown-up actors in this movie, but
okay, so what's it like coming in cold to Chamber of Secrets? You still haven't seen The Sorcerer's Stone. But you said you had a little trouble, right?
Let me quote from my notes.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening. And I don't know if you can understand if you haven't read the book or are a fan.
What is it that you're not understanding? Like getting onto platform 9 3/4 or getting on a train or like it's nothing.
Like I said, everyone is saying, oh, it's Hagrid. Oh, it's like, but I don't know who these people are. I need to know who they are. I don't need to know what their names are. Like I can read that on IMDb, but it means nothing.
But you
to
can
me.
tell. But it's not. It's plainly obvious that Hagrid is friend to the children, right? It's plainly obvious that Snape does not like Harry Potter, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm not fucking
in this
brain
movie,
dead.
we see the Weasley towards the big.
I'm talking about the finer points of the mythology that actually sort of do make a difference. And I like you alluded to it before. Like, if you're my record on guessing what's the when I haven't seen the original, what's the sequel thing and what's from the original is very poor. I'm not dealing with a good average here already. But I had a similar thought here where I was like, all these characters are being reintroduced as if we should know who they are. But I'm at a loss to know which ones are new and which ones are legacy characters.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you know, I mean, it seems obvious to me that this is the first time we're meeting Mr. Weasley.
No, I didn't. I thought...
But they introduce Harry
That's
to
what I'm
him.
saying! I don't know! I don't know!
So this is the first time we see the Weasley home. They have the great
Even
clock
Julie
that
Walters
tells...
and the sister?
We see Julie Walters in the first movie when Harry is when he's getting onto... He doesn't know how to get onto platform 9 3/4, and she helps him. So that's how he meets Ron.
There was... Tell you what, I had to do everything backwards. So when... Speaking of that platform scene, the fact that he tried to jump through the wall, but it didn't disappear.
Right.
In my head, I just went, okay, so in the first one, he jumped through. Fine.
Yeah.
So I had to... But I had to do that with everything.
What? It's like you're complaining that you had to think while watching
It's not about
the movie.
it's not about...
It's okay to think.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this off air when I first started watching this over 3 years ago. And I said that, you know, this seems very modern to me to put the burden on the viewer to catch up. Whereas, you know, look at the movies that we've done from the 70s and the 90s. They will tell you everything you need to know again at the beginning of a sequel.
Well, apparently not, though. You thought Cherry Gans was in the first 48 hours. What are you talking about?
But there were kind of...
You're like, those bikers, they're totally in the first movie, right? No.
There are certain story mechanisms, conventions that that sequels of the past have done to catch up the viewer and assume they haven't seen anything before.
No, okay, I get that.
And
yeah.
this is very much like, you know, the onus is on you to have either read the books or seen the original and to just generally know what's going on. And obviously that's annoying to me as someone who happens to be in that position. But I just think it's a historical thing. It's like, I guess it would be the same if I went into, you know, the middle of Infinity War. They wouldn't have a bit at the beginning, which is like...
Let's catch you up.
Right. You know? I just need like... But... So I became nostalgic for those...
I don't know, though. Like, I think I just disagree. You know, like, you understand that the Dursleys hate Harry Potter. That's plainly evident at the beginning of this movie.
Well, yeah, the emotions are clear because Chris Columbus knows how to do that, and he's not exactly, like, subtle. But I just... And, yeah... I just don't... Yeah, just story-wise, and, you know, I don't know... Well, I do know why we can't do it, because corporations want you to buy every piece of media associated with it. It's why The Rise of Skywalker alludes to comics that haven't even been written yet. Mm-hmm. You know, because they want you to buy everything. It's like, you know, cross-promotion.
Yeah.
So I get it from that respect, but it's, you know, I just became nostalgic for all those clunky things that sequels do that we've been satirizing all this time. Mm-hmm. I felt like, you know, I could do with this now. That was it. By the end of the movie, I kind of knew what was going on, I think.
Kind of,
sort of.
You caught up?
Yeah.
You were able to catch up with this children's movie?
Tell you what else is incredibly distracting is that you can't turn a corner in this movie without running into a British national acting treasure.
True.
Like, Hogwarts is basically the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
just another reason to fucking love these movies.
Even though I knew that going in, it still took me aback. That, like, there's Jason Isaacs, there's Robbie Coltrane. Then there's a bit of the movie where there's no one, and then Julian Glover. I was like, I cannot believe the amount of talent and star power that is driving this movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it's really interesting because it's all British in nature. But the way the movie is made could not be more Hollywood. I think that was the point I was trying to get to earlier. And there's a really weird... That's a really weird juxtaposition that kind of works, but what's kind of weird about it is it's like it's both extremes. Because you're like, when you have a ghost cameo of John Cleese, that's the most British thing you could imagine, right? And you have John Williams musical scoring, which is the most thing that you most associate with big Hollywood movies of the recent era. It's like I never really felt those two things were clashing, but I did notice the discrepancy of, I guess, what's on screen and how it's represented on screen. Just because because the Britishness in it is so quintessentially iconographically British. It's a Monty Python, Leslie Phillips, a British sex comedy movie actor from the 1960s as the Sorting Hat. It's not the Talking Hat, the Sorting Hat. I'm annoying so many people. I should open my fucking mouth, buddy. Should I?
Oh my God.
The Talking Hat. You all know the Talking Hat.
Oh my God. All right, we're just getting started here. I'm gonna give Tom a little break, a breather, so he can get his shit together before he's murdered. Give us a couple of minutes. Can I ask you a question? Do you like beer? I like beer. It's required by law that you like beer when you're living in San Diego, California, but even I can get confused and dizzied by the amount of choices that you can see at your local beer store. What's a person to do? I'll tell you what you do. You'll watch the Vegas Beer Guys, a live show on Instagram and Facebook, and they will set you right as to what beers you should have in your life or should not have in your life. The Vegas Beer Guys are brought to you by Dan Aker, the beer professional, and Stephen Weiss, self-proclaimed beer novice. They'll drink beers for you and drink beers with you. Go ahead and check out their live shows, and they'll tell you which beers you should be having in your fridge. Everybody wants the perfect combination of malt and hops in your life, and Dan Aker and Stephen Weiss are the perfect combination of fantastic and wonderful. Check them out on Facebook. Check them out on Instagram. Find them. You're going to watch their show and love their show. They give away free merch during their shows, so go ahead and check out the Vegas Beer Guys. What a great time. And we're back. Tom and I are here, of course, discussing the 2002 film, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Tom, I don't imagine there's a lot of people listening to this who are like you, who need a refresher course, but what's the plot of this particular film? What happens? Or is this something you need me to do?
Oh, it's like a murder mystery.
Okay, yeah.
At some point in the movie, kids start dying.
Or
in big numbers.
Freezing.
They don't close the school.
Nope.
Which is weird.
It's threatened many he
times.
Says.
I think the term that Richard Harris's Dumbledore uses, he actually uses the phrase, "It is likely we will have to close the school." We're about 5 kids dead.
5 kids deep. Minerva McGonagall at one point says, "I'm afraid we're going to have to close the school."
Yeah, right. And this relates to a kind of cabinet that allows Chris Columbus to pull a little thing out of a big thing. There's lots of Indiana Jones labyrinthy stuff. And are you getting this, or is this too complicated for you?
I'm wondering if you're getting this. But Harry Potter, he is back for his second year at the Wizarding School.
Not for the first 30 minutes.
True.
And I was like, I thought, okay, classic sequel inversion. This one is not going to be in the school, or we're going to see a lot less of the school. But it's only 30 minutes of a 2-hour 40 movie is not at the school. And
do you have a big problem with that? The 2 hours and 40 minutes for one of the shortest books. So basically, they're just cramming everything that's in the book in the movie.
At the time, I was definitely pissed. Because that's much longer than I feel we've ever done before.
And maybe that's why you like Order of the Phoenix so much, because that's like the biggest book and the shortest movie.
But to be honest, I think it doesn't drag as much for me. I think because, as they announce early on in the movie, there is a plot. This is one of the more plot-heavy. In terms of what I think of plot, not like, the murder mystery element, the trying to find something out that you actually find out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the other movies in this series don't work on that basis. It's not always clear what we're trying to find out, and we don't find it out for a lot of these movies. But that's more a problem of it being an ongoing series. And that's another thing I loved about this, is it felt so self-contained. And again, as the movies went on, I learned to admire this, that it was giving you something that was very, like, cut and dry in terms of, like, plot mechanics.
Okay.
Even though I apparently can't tell you what that plot is now. But yeah, and so I thought I could, I was backtracking going, well, what are they doing differently this time? That must be what happened in the first movie.
Okay.
But what I could see, and I'm not, my movie brain kind of set in where I could see, like, okay, so here's the formula. He goes to the train station. It's a new school year. He pisses off Uncle Vernon, goes to school.
Right.
Goes on the train. Wizard Narnia. Into school. The school year starts. New Defense of the Dark Arts League teacher. And that, the pretty much. I
mean, each of these movies,
that's how
until
it goes.
You get to the last two, follows a school year.
Right, and that's.
So you have fall, you have winter, you get into spring.
And coincidentally, that's pretty much how sequels work, isn't it? Like, especially horror sequels seem to have this 1 year gap between the movies.
Right.
Except, in the world of the movies, you have a 1 year gap. But because of the release structure of these movies, we're actually working on the same. They're syncing up. Because these movies are being released 1 year after the other.
Well, just for the first two. After that, they have to start putting a little more space in between the movies.
Okay, so
it's just too much of a pace for them to, keep up with.
Well, I actually made that note. I said we're a year in the real world and we're a year in the world of the film. I wonder if we keep with this. I mean, it's probably not as bad as like. Those horror movies that are like, Karate Kid is probably the worst, isn't it? Where it's like 1 year, but 10 in the real, 10 in our world. So
1 year in the character's life, and 40 years in real life.
That's right. And I could see lots of reunions. It felt very much like I don't know how it works in the book, but it felt very much like. I guess you have a built-in reunion because of the school year.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, because Harry is always at home with the Dursleys, and the Dursleys are who they are, he has very little contact with his friends. I mean, in this movie, they literally have to break him out.
With the flying car, which I loved. I loved that kind of Herbie love bug vibe.
Yeah.
And, that's that kind of... Those... for want of a better word, Disney movie things, I kind of learned to miss. As much as I love Prisoner of Azkaban, I think that is the transition where those things that are just kind of cute and funny become really scary. Like the buzz. Buzz.
I have notes. I have notes for each of these movies, You can even notice with the Warner Brothers logo.
That's a whole
how
story
dark,
in itself.
Yeah, like how dark these movies progressively get.
It's like, when does that become just a wrought iron gate?
Exactly. Yeah. Somewhere around in the 6 or 7, part 1, I mean, it just gets worse and worse for the poor Warner Brothers logo.
Yeah.
Where it's like rotting from the inside out because of how dark the movies are getting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. With this movie, the crux of this story is that.
See, I did learn something.
You did. Look at you go.
I needed to.
The Horcrux of this movie.
I don't know if I'd have remembered it if I didn't write it down 20 times, but okay. I still don't know what it is.
Come on. So what's happening in this movie is they're back at school, and kids aren't dying though, Tom. They're
petrifying.
They're frozen. They're petrified.
Yeah, and they set that up, they set that up early with the cat. And at the time I knew, I was like, oh, this is how they're going to get out of genocide of children.
Right.
I was like, at this point, but this is what I like about the kind of horror aspects, and this feels very gremlin-y. Like, from that point onwards where they show you the petrified cat, they've got permission to kill as many kids as they want. And they, like, I wrote down, like, what, at the end of the movie, I was like, what has happened, in terms of violence in this movie? And it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking.
Well, that's it's one of the weaker points of this book and, in turn, the movie, where it's still, this movie is far darker than the first movie, but
I actually had a question. I asked that as a question in my notes. Like, is the Sorcerer's Stone as fucked up as this?
No, yeah. I mean, it still has those elements, but it's not, progressively each movie gets darker and darker and darker.
But
the one thing about the book and the movie is that very idea of, you still in the back of your mind know that everybody's going to be okay. We haven't started taking lives for real yet.
Right.
And because out of happenstance, seeing through a ghost, seeing through the reflection in the water, using a mirror, whatever it is, nobody actually dies. And so that's still the very kid-friendly portion of this movie that... I mean, I'm not mad at it, but it's...
It's strong. It would seem it would border on being offensive and tasteless to have to kill so many children of that age in a movie, I think.
Right. And still not closing the school. The amount of shit that goes on in this school from year to year is astonishing.
It is. So, but I think it's very effective because then, Chris Columbus has obviously made a lot of kids movies, so he knows industrially how it all works. And here he's sort of like, the plot is its own censorship because you can do all these horribly fucked up things to kids and then immediately walk them back by the nature of the plot. And I kind of thought
that the first two movies have to your point, because of the mystery element, they have a real kind of Scooby-Doo feeling to them.
They certainly do. I say it felt like Inspector Morse at one point. So I think that's a good, for this stage when the kids are this young who are in the movie, and it's about kids of this age. I think that's exactly where they should be pitching it.
Right. I think you're right in the sense of Christopher Columbus. He gets tone, so tonally it's right where it should be.
But it also doesn't mean that those things. I mean, you were saying that the kids are not dead, but in terms of what's being represented, they are being horribly murdered. Like, we kind of get to see that. We don't get the consequences of it, but we still get to see it. And I liked I liked that kind of, it's a sort of guilty pleasure, really, isn't it? Of like, we are an adult horror movie, but basically it's all a dream. So I thought that was great, and more generally, I think it speaks to the way that magic is great for sequels. This ability to bring people back from the dead really helps out when you're making a bunch of movies where you want characters to die or nearly die.
Right.
But you also know that there's this built-in kind of like...
All you need is some mandrake juice,
Yeah, you need like the Deus Ex Machina of magic to kind of like... literally in the end, like Christ-like resurrection of Harry Potter.
I'm curious about something. I want to ask you, because you haven't seen the first movie, what'd you think of Quidditch?
I knew you were going to say that. How did I know you were going to say that? Well, I did what what you will find out I do with most of this, where I try and think about something that I know and like to kind of get me into it. And with here, I was thinking... well, this is like pod racing, right? So offensive. If you like these movies,
oh my god!
Offensive. I thought, music, sound effect wise, it reminded me of pod races. There's this little kid. I thought the effects looked great.
Well, that's the thing, because you haven't seen the first movie. So for me, the jump in the quality of how Quidditch looks from the first movie to the second movie,
it was seamless.
It is really, astonishing. I think it looks so good in this movie, so much better.
Yeah, I remember thinking that looks really seamless. And I remember when we get introduced to Dobby the house elf quite early on, and I remember thinking, this looks better than, say, Phantom Menace, but we're still a little ways from full integration of CGI characters into the action. I think by the end of this series, we've got there. But Dobby was kind of an area where I began to question whether issues-wise, they were taking on more than they could chew. Because to me...
How do you mean issues?
Because...
the issues of the CGI?
No.
The character, or...
I thought the fact that, because these house elves seem to me to be about slavery and torture. Whenever they're around, those are the two big themes. And in the frame of this kind of movie, it's like, there were times where I thought, are we laughing too much at the fact that this is basically a slave who's being kept here and being tortured for information every time he doesn't give anything up? Like, I thought maybe, I want this to be an adult horror film, and that kind of goes with it. But are we
maybe too far?
Are we trivializing, the gravity of that sort of thing? I think by the end of the movie, when he's freed and they actually kind of acknowledge, oh yeah, he's being kept as a slave. But the way that it's weird to me that the so-called heroes of this film, how badly they treat Dobby, this person who is not only a complete victim, but historically is in the role of a slave. And just, like, they don't account for... Obviously, that comes with a bunch of assumptions about the fact that he's inferior, that, the elves are known to be duplicitous, all that sort of stuff. But those are kind of like bad stereotypes that we don't really disprove, and that the characters aren't kind of like, no one's like, hey, don't, it's like, that's a living creature. Don't fucking talk to him that way.
Exactly.
And I'm like, unless you're doing something where, like, we're not at the point where they're trying to darken the image of Harry as an anti-hero yet. And yet his behavior towards Dobby is only excusable if he is this morally ambiguous character, which he has yet to become, to me.
Well, he's also ignorant. He's ignorant of house elves.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I'm reading into it, but I just don't think the movie's kind of... I just think it kind of forgot that you need to account for your behavior. In other areas, I thought it worked quite well. Like, there was a deft way that they treated the idea that basically, within the wizard community, whatever it's called, I'm sure there's
the Wizarding World.
The Wizarding World. there is white supremacism, and it's at Hogwarts. Like, eugenics is a big thing in the wizard world. Like, and for some reason that came across in a way that seemed responsible and appropriate. But I felt like we were laughing too much at a slave being kept as a slave and being hurt. So, and it's interesting that he's not in so many more of these movies, because I felt like somebody's got to deal with how they treat Dobby at some point.
Yeah, there's a lot of house elf stuff that's in the books that don't make it into the movies.
It felt like that.
You know, just sort of the idea, even say Ron, who's from a wizarding family, they like it. That, you know, so there's this whole idea.
Okay, that sounds worse. Okay.
That it's much worse. That the slave likes being the slave, and they want, you know. So this that whole other thing, but by the time you get to Order of the Phoenix, it starts coming into play about the manner in which you treat, because like Sirius,
he gets a hero's death, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gets a hero's death, but even before that, in the Order of the Phoenix, in the book, Sirius essentially dies because of how he treats his house elf. So, you know, at a certain point, Dumbledore will make the point that how you treat all living creatures matters. Like, if he had treated his house elf differently, he wouldn't have died. So,
but let's face it, J.K. Rowling as a human being doesn't understand that. So
apparently so, yeah. I mean,
I was probably one of the few people who was happy that she was outed as a transphobic prick.
Yeah,
and yes, a woman can be a prick, J.K.
All right. I think that's a good place to leave it for this segment. We're going to take another break, and then we'll come back, and we'll finish out.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back. Tom and I are here talking about the 2002 film Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Tom, you've been talking in the past about fantasy and mythology. So I guess what I want to ask you is, how much of this movie bothers you? I mean, do you like seeing the polyjuice potion and them turning into other people? I know you don't like the look of that snake, but the dueling club. This is all shit I really love in this movie, you know? Or the spiders.
But I mean, well, here's my answer to that. That's within that kind of margin of error that links it to stuff that I like. So again, it comes down to tone, because I think what Columbus does, which is really interesting in here, is like, by marrying grown-up horror with kids slapstick, you end up in the middle with gross-out comedy. And there's a lot of like vomiting and spitting up in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's great because it takes care of the body horror for the grown-ups who want something a little bit, you know, visceral. But it's also perfectly in line with like a high school or even like preteen comedy.
Yeah, I love that scene where Ron spitting out the slugs.
It's disgusting,
and
yeah.
And Hagrid just says, better out than in.
Yeah, and those, the mandrakes, is it?
Yeah, the baby, yeah.
And yeah, I thought, oh, this is right on the cusp of, kid and adult entertainment, and I liked it.
And I always think of those mandrakes, those sort of plant babies, because you have the scene where they're pulling them out of their pots and they're whining and crying, and then you have a scene later where Dumbledore's explaining that they're going to be chopped up into little bits and juiced to make the mandrews, the mandrake potion to help unpetrify everybody. And so I just think of the torture of those things being chopped up.
I did too, but like in an entirely appropriate way. So in my head, I went from on one end I'm like, this is like dissecting frogs at school, and then on the other hand I'm going, these babies are being aborted. So I'm like, I'm getting both things, and I like it. But you mentioned the spiders, and I kind of thought, well, because it's backed by John Williams and because Chris Columbus is a Hollywood director, this feels like The Goonies or Temple of Doom or something like that, which is the kind of Indiana Jones vibe. So I think that's something I can get down with.
I felt the same way.
It's not particularly. It's like it's when the magic and the mythology starts going to this sort of metaphysical level that you have to try it. You have to try and understand it on that level. If you can just understand it as magic, is a magic as a MacGuffin, which it largely is here. Like, it doesn't speak to this greater mythology. Although I did appreciate the fact that you spent the whole movie... Because, there's various things that come in and out of my consciousness about this. One, that there's this guy called Voldemort, who's sort of hanging around, kind of Blofeld-like in this. Again, I need to... This is how I rationalize it.
Everything
That's how
comes
I
back.
rationalize it. And I like the fact that you think, oh, he's just not going to be in this movie. And then he is. Because I wrote down John Kreese. And I thought I was trying to say John Cleese. But I read it back and went, no, I meant John Kreese. I meant the fact that in Karate Kid 3, you think he's written out of the movie and then he appears
and he's back,
from behind his own cutout. And I had a similar thing here where I was like, that's a nice little, that's a good way to sort of, tease his... for him to just be this presence that's always nearly there until he very much is there, and then it all goes downhill.
And so you think it goes downhill there?
No, I know I don't want to give away what I feel, because I also don't want to give the impression that I don't like Ralph Fiennes. I think this is one of his greatest performances.
Oh, he's fabulous.
Yeah. And again, I am very mixed on my opinion of Ralph Fiennes' performances. He's another Branagh in my mind. It can go one way or it can go the other. It can be In Bruges or it can be Strange Days. It can't be both.
Well, I mean, does he really have a lot of Strange Days performances for you?
Every other performance from Ralph Fiennes is, to me, really awful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But some of the best performances I've ever seen on screen as well. So,
all right. Well, sticking to this movie, though, I mean, like, look, we're jumping around a little bit, but story-wise, of course, the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. The kids are more or less actively searching or trying to solve this mystery.
Yeah.
But you have this whole added plot for the story in which, Harry Potter might be the last living relative.
Yeah.
That last living relative, Salazar Slytherin. Maybe I have the COVID fog. But at any rate,
you sound like you've had a stroke
thing,
to me, but that's probably because I don't understand the words you use.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the the first movie, Harry Potter is beset by being Harry Potter. Everybody's looking at him all the time because he is who he is and he survived how he survived. In this movie, it switches to a more ominous, a darker tone because now everybody thinks he might be Salazar Slytherin's heir, and so he is somehow connected to all the bad shit that's happening. And you have this added aspect of the diary which he finds, and I love that scene where he actually ends up thinking that maybe Hagrid opened up the Chamber of Secrets. And once we get into the Chamber of Secrets, the thing I wanted to get to or say was that guy, that young actor who played the young Voldemort, I think is great.
Who is he again?
I don't even know his name.
I think he turns...
But I think he is pitch perfect.
Doesn't he turn out to be somebody? What's his character name?
Oh, well, you mean Tom Marvolo?
Tom Marvolo, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking on IMDb because I have a feeling that he turns out to be someone.
That we've seen before, you mean?
No, I mean he'll turn out to be someone who's relatively famous, but maybe
That's
not.
what I mean.
Tom Riddle. No, Christian Coulson. Never heard of him. I am wrong. Sorry, Christian Coulson.
But at any rate, I think he's pitch perfect in that scene. I love him. And like I said in our opening, mini-sode, I had kind of hinged this whole movie on how well the basilisk looks at the end of this, and I think it looks great. I love the whole scene.
What is a basilisk?
A serpent.
That's a serpent, okay. But not the Doctor Who snake. No.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Oh.
The huge, large serpent at the end of the movie. We're in the Chamber of Secrets.
Okay.
You didn't like it?
I don't know. I don't think we're talking about the same snake, but I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I like this movie. It's number 2 on my list. I don't like this series. I mean, what do you want from me?
Well, I would like you to know the difference between the small snake that comes out of...
Why? I think it's the small snake. It's the small snake.
The small snake looks bad. The serpent looks good.
Fine. Good.
But it's like you don't even know that the serpent that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the last thing that Harry kills. He puts the sword through its head.
I don't remember it. I don't have a note saying it looks like Doctor Who, so I probably thought it was fine. One of the things I thought about this. I guess this is from the first movie. We'll find out now.
Oh yeah,
because it's in all the other movies. Is the moving photographs?
Oh yeah, sure.
Animated photographs, and I thought, that's a great cinematic solution to sequels where people look at photographs of characters who aren't there. Right, like a moving image version of that.
Right.
And then the books that come to physical life in here was like a really nice metaphor for this being a literary adaptation. And often at times in this movie, we're just looking at characters read a book. And I thought that was kind of that was like stylistically interesting, because one of the things you got to do in a literary adaptation, even though I don't know in terms of substance what this movie adapted from the book and what it didn't, I know that they've thought about, well, how do we address the fact that this was a book and that we're adapting it into a movie? Like, they thought about that on an imagistic level, and I definitely got that. I like the fact that the flashbacks were unreliable, that we're essentially doing like a Usual Suspects.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And we were doing like Godfather 2 with magic. We got the split historical period, but it's all on the same screen because Harry can appear there as an apparition. Mm-hmm. Like Woody Allen style at his own history. So a lot of the stylistic choices here I like. I tell you what gets me about Columbus's direction, and we were talking a little bit about the pod races. He's like the anti-George Lucas. His problems as a director are the reverse of George Lucas's problems as a director. His foregrounds are way too busy, and there's nothing going on in his background.
Right.
Whereas like George Lucas is like, he's staging the front stuff really well. He's putting a bunch of shit in the back.
Bunch of shit. Yeah, like when you go and watch the edited 4, 5, and 6.
There's like
that's where that's at
Jawas
play.
farting and falling off horses. It's just insane. So I did kind of think that, but I'm with that. And well, but let's talk about the act. We could wind up talking about the acting because we haven't really addressed that yet.
That's true.
My feeling is, and I know you're going to disagree with this, the central trio here are horrid.
I mean,
Harry, Hermione, and Ron are, and do you know what? I'm not compare. I don't expect them to be better than, the greatest cast ever, the greatest British cast ever assembled. I'm not expecting them to be as good as Robbie Coltrane, Jason Isaacs, Alan Rickman. I am not comparing them to them. I am comparing them to the other kids at that school who are categorically better actors than they are, but they're not as good looking, and they're not as good looking, and I don't know what else. I don't know what's keeping them from casting these talented kids. Every time a supporting kid character opens his mouth, I'm like, well, they sound as if their mouths have developed, unlike our central trio. I cannot enunciate words.
I cannot completely disagree with you because, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's all of that is at play.
Emma Watson can't even speak yet.
I think you're far more harsher than I would be, though.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's funny because when you mentioned all the other kids, I mean, it's funny that because they are great. They're really
good.
Really great child actors. I mean, they seem far more natural.
Yeah. They're just uglier.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, I think...
But I also think the trio grows over time, and I think they become quite good actors throughout the series.
I mean, I also, I don't want to treat them all the same. I mean, I think Emma Watson is still a terrible actor. But I think here she looks like her mouth hasn't formed yet. But, and, Ron, I have no opinion about, but I don't think he's doing a very good job here. And Harry, Daniel Radcliffe, I think, is still a little on the bland side for me, but he's competent, and there's little traces of that competency here. Mm-hmm. And, you don't want that character to be too interesting because it fucks up their role in the story.
Yeah.
Certainly at this point. You want him to be like, Luke Skywalker in A New Hope, like nondescript. Or Neo in The Matrix. Kind of like, not too interesting at this point. Need room for them to grow.
Yeah.
But it's just comparing it, every time. I guess it's also like all the kids, they all speak with this kind of like these sort of trained drama school accents, which is how the rest of the world understands how the British speak. But the supporting actor kids all speak with regional accents, which is how British people really speak.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's a factor too. I think there's a huge amount of like, these kids are too ugly and too regional to be the leads in this Hollywood movie, and that makes me angry. But it wouldn't if these guys were like vaguely talented, and I don't think they are.
Oh, I think they're talented.
It's also, I mean, we'll get into this with later movies, but having seen Daniel Radcliffe send himself up in Ricky Gervais's Extras,
oh, hilarious.
I can't see him do anything that's romantic or sexual anymore. Because there's no distinction between that and when they get to all the puberty stuff. But here, yeah, I mean, it really rubbed me the wrong way. So, that's some context when we get to Deathly Hallows Part 1 and I have to watch just these characters on screen.
Right.
That's partly why it's such a
well, huge, and I don't have the adverse reaction you do to them as actors. I can see in the first 2 movies that they are at the beginning of something. But by the time we get to the 3rd movie, I think they've grown as actors in a way that, for me, I can see the jump.
It's cultural. It's like the Jake Lloyd syndrome. You're trying to cast based on what you want them to look like.
Right.
And sound like, not what their capabilities are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
And that's... it's okay for them to be worse than some of the greatest actors who've ever lived. But not for them to be worse than their peers significantly. And I think any time they're asked to carry the action on their own, I think this movie really suffers. And when Emma Watson is out of the movie, everything gets better. For me.
All right.
But so that's the kind of starting point of this. But I mean, what can you say about a movie where Alan Rickman and Maggie Smith are kind of essentially cameos?
Yeah.
About like what the kind of the deep bench that they have.
But how good are they? I mean, they're so good.
Yeah, they're perfect. Everyone is kind of perfectly cast.
Yeah.
And, they're also not...
And you've mentioned Jason Isaacs a couple of times.
Wow.
And this is his first appearance in the series.
Oh,
and
I thought we'd seen him before.
So good.
I didn't get that.
Of course you didn't. I knew you wouldn't. But one of my favorite notes that I took was, and it's one of my favorite moments in the movie, at the end, Harry has stabbed the diary, which we'll find out later is a Horcrux. And Jason Isaacs comes to the school and wonders why Dumbledore's back. And, you have that whole bit. And Dumbledore explains that it was Voldemort and he was trying to get through, via this diary. And Jason Isaacs ad-libbed, improvised the line where he looked down at Harry Potter and said, well, let us hope that Harry Potter will always be here to save the day. And Daniel Radcliffe improvised the line that said, don't worry, I will be.
Okay, great.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, he should be a writer instead of an actor. Sorry, that was mean. No, that is great.
Mean.
That's very impressive.
Did you make it to the end of the credits, by the way?
Yes, I did. I saw the extra Kenneth Branagh scene.
All right.
I like that. First of all, I like the fact that because I'm trained in this sort of Marvel movie again, like post this where post-credit scene, bit of essential information, and I was just like, oh, and then I was like, oh, it's Kenneth Branagh. Oh, it just matters for his plot, and now that plot is done.
Done.
Yay!
Yeah.
That scored for me on everything. I was like, if you miss this, you would lose nothing.
Right.
But I've seen it. It's an extra bit of Kenneth Branagh, and it's funny.
Nice.
I also, shout out to... I like the fact that we have, like, an intergenerational cast as well. We have like great actors from literally every generation of actor, like all the way up to Richard Harris, and Shirley Henderson as Moaning Myrtle.
Yeah,
I mean that's Babu Frick for those of you who don't know. That's the voice of Babu
and
Frick.
The most remarkable thing, because she shows up in later movies, like her ability to always look like a 17-year-old student is astonishing.
She very rarely plays her own age.
Yeah.
In the movie Greed, she plays like an octogenarian woman. She often plays like children.
Yeah.
And is equally convincing as both. But I like the fact that, this movie, even though it is very much this big Hollywood production, and it is throwing at you like Hollywood approved British actors like Alan Rickman. But there are these slightly more alternative younger actors who are getting screen time, doing amazing things. And David Bradley, too, who, like, floats between being well-known and not well-known. He's probably known to most people through this as the janitor. What's his name? The custodian.
Yeah. God, fog brain again. It'll come to me.
Yeah. And he's like,
but he's
very
well. The astonishing
in
thing for me is to see him in this, and then see him in like Game of Thrones.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you can see the extent to which he is a great actor.
Yeah. And, as someone who has watched movies that John Cleese did not need to be in that he was in, I was grateful for how they used him in this movie.
Okay.
There's just a python floating about.
Well, because he disappears after it.
He does.
Like, you don't see him again.
Which, again, should have been the case in the Bond films as well. But was not.
That's funny.
So this is a good starting point, I think.
Absolutely.
I think it actually no, it gets better and then it gets worse. For me. I know you don't feel that way because you have zero objectivity.
How dare you?
I guess we have to come at this zero objectivity and zero generosity.
Filch. That's who it is.
Perfect.
Okay. Anything else you want to get off your chest for Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets?
Another thing that grinds my gears. No, I as I said, I think the lesson of this is like, when you're watching a film series, you need to watch the whole thing and then go back, because there's no way I would have put this so high up if I knew what was coming. I didn't know how much I enjoyed this movie until the entire series was over. And I didn't know. And also, it helped that I watched Home Alone, the Home Alone movies before doing this podcast as well, because then I'm just
what are you doing watching those movies?
I have a 3-year-old son, Mike.
All right, fair enough. I'm like, without the purposes of this podcast, you're watching sequels? What the hell are you doing?
Well, I did. I kind of got two minutes into Home Alone 2, Alone in New York, and I suggested that we change the channel because I was like, I can see a future in which I'm watching this again.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. For Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions, I'm Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. We will see you next time for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Say goodbye, Tom.
You're never going